Hello everyone, and welcome back to Why the Hell Do We Care Episode 6. I am your host, Randall Bahamut, and today we actually have more Samurai Warriors than Dynasty Warriors to talk about. First, let's start off with Wu's Joutai. It is unknown when Joutai was born, but he got his playable debut in Dynasty Warriors 4. Originally he was a pirate and then decided to join up with Wu and Sun Ce. He is generally shown to be Sun Quan's loyal vassal and bodyguard, and usually appears by his master's side. He earned Sun Quan's respect after he saved Quan when he was isolated and surrounded on all sides. His roles in battles are generally minor outside of being a silent badass who protects Sun Quan. He is a pretty quiet man and rarely speaks. The in-game encyclopedia sometimes say that he got training in Eastern lands to explain why he is the lone Chinese man running around with a Japanese katana. Now, let's see how he wields his out-of-place weapon. Joutai is a speed type, and is a pretty fun one. His S-string is pretty standard, if a bit small in his swing arcs. His charge attacks fit all of the fast-draw samurai tropes. His C2, C3, and C6 all hit many times in rapid succession, and in Dynasty Warriors 8, some of his attacks cause enemies to freeze in place while being attacked until he sheathes his blade, where they feel the full brunt of his attack. His R1s are fairly lackluster, not doing much damage or having special effects on them. His Musou is a pretty powerful single slash that actually hits about 12 times in rapid succession in a wide area. His passive is Vigor, which increases damage inflicted with combo attacks, which fits well with his multi-hit attacks. Joutai was one of my brother's favorite characters back when he got introduced in 4, and I agree with him that he is pretty fun to play as. Guo Huai was born in 187 AD and got his playable debut in Dynasty Warriors 7. Guo Huai's contribution in Dynasty Warriors 7 focused around his loyalty to Wei and Zhao Yuan and his family. At the Battle of Mount Dingzheng, Guo Huai wanted to contribute more, but due to illness he couldn't and Zhao Yuan was killed. He watched over his son Zhao Ba out of respect for his fallen friend, but is devastated when Ba defects to Shu. Later, he duels Zhao Ba and is about to execute him when he is slain by Jiang Wei. His defining character traits are his zealous loyalty to Wei and the fact he is constantly ill and coughing all the time. Kinda makes me wonder how he is even fighting on the battlefield. Now, let's see how he wields that arm cannon of his next. Guo Huai is a technique type with a pretty interesting weapon. His S-string is kinda bad. It has really short range and it isn't that quick, so it can cause some problems. His charge attacks, on the other hand, are pretty fun. Most involve him machine gunning the hell out of everything in front of him. His C2 and C5 hit his opponents up and chews them up while they are knocked into the air. His C3 EX attack is nothing more than a massive spray of bullets everywhere in front of him like an extended C6. His ground R1 is a long-range mortar attack that can be a bit annoying to aim, and his aerial is a wide-ranged air shot. His Musou is an unblockable attack where he jams his gun into the enemy and just starts blasting away at them for massive damage. His passive is Focus, which boosts Musou gauge, which I have talked about before, and is both good and bad. Overall, Guo Huai may disappoint with his normal attacks, but his charge attacks and his Musou are a lot of fun to play with. Hideyoshi Toyotomi was born in 1536 AD and was first playable in Samurai Warriors Extreme Legends. Hideyoshi is probably one of the most famous peasant samurai who went from a lowly servant of Nobunaga to the dominant warlord of the era, and is known as one of the three unifiers alongside Nobunaga Oda and Ieyasu Tokugawa. In the first game, he primarily serves as Nobunaga's general, serving him well in many battles. One noteworthy event was when he supposedly managed to build a castle in one night. He also helped to recruit others to Nobunaga's army like Hanbei Takenaga. The later games focus on what happens after Nobunaga's death and his decision to take over Nobunaga's ambition. First, he avenged his master by fighting Mitsuhide Akechi and finally rose to dominance after the Battle of Otowater Castle. Hideyoshi is very happy-go-lucky, a bit monkeyish, and loves golden women. He truly wishes to make a happy Japan and is even willing to treat his enemies kindly after their surrender. Now let's see how well he monkeys about with that staff of his. Hideyoshi is a power type who is actually pretty agile and is a long attack string fighter. His standard combo hits really wide, and he moves around a lot during it. His charge attacks are alright, but he doesn't have any real standouts and are fairly simple. His C4, C6, and C8 are all really similar, with slight differences in range and a third hit on C8. I'd say his C9 is his best crowd clearer with a couple wide area attacks. His ground R1 is pretty good and hits multiple times all around him for decent damage. And his aerial is a forgettable air dive. His Musou is kind of hard to control with a lot of leaping all over the place. His passive is Power, which boosts every power type character stats, so it's good paired with other power types. Of the long attack stringers we have seen, Hideyoshi is probably the least fun to play as for me. He can fight well, but he just isn't very interesting to play as in my opinion. Yukimura Sanada was born in 1567 AD and is one of the original samurai warriors. He's the poster boy for the series and shows up on a lot of the box art and game manuals, and he even has a campaign dedicated to himself and his brother in Samurai Warriors 4. He originally served the Takeda clan under Shingen Takeda. He proved his worth on the battlefield alongside his brother Nobuyuki against foes like Uesugi Kenshin and Ieyasu Tokugawa. After Shingen's death, they continued to serve his heir Katsuyori. Katsuyori did not share his predecessor's skill in battle and was soundly defeated by Nobunaga Oda, and the Sanada brothers were made Nobunaga's vassals. Yukimura also became friends with Kanetsugu Nao and Mitsunari Ishida when they helped him defend Ueda Castle. When Ieyasu Tokugawa moved to take control of Japan after Hideyoshi's death, Yukimura joined up with Mitsunari's western army, and his brother Nobuyuki joined Ieyasu's eastern army. In the final battles of Osaka Castle, Yukimura led a suicide charge against Ieyasu and is forced to fight his brother. He dies feet away from Ieyasu, who was so impressed with the samurai's skills and determination, he declared Yukimura to be the greatest samurai in all the land. Yukimura is generally portrayed as being very hot-blooded and duty-bound, and he greatly respects his lord and his brother. Now, let's see how well Yukimura can skewer his foes. Yukimura is a speed type and an all-around good one. His S-string is decent. Decent power, decent range, decent speed. He has some good variety in his charge attacks as well. His C1 is a bit odd, but can be useful for charging through a bunch of soldiers as long as you don't charge it right next to them. His C2 is a good officer slayer, and his C4 is also good for dueling officers with its first two attacks, and its final swing is a good crowd clearer. His C5 is a nice unblockable impale to slam attack. His R1s are alright, they're both decent dash attacks for closing in. His Musou is pretty standard Samurai Warriors fare, decent multi-hits or invincibility. His passive is stamina, which is nice for a heal, but not to be relied on. Overall, Yukimura is a pretty solid character and can fit whatever situation he is put into. Ranmaru Mori was born in 1565 AD and was one of the original samurai warriors. In the first game, he originally served the Saito clan alongside Mitsuhide Akechi, but they are both dissatisfied with their current leadership, so they decide to distinguish themselves in battle to impress their enemy Nobunaga Oda, and successfully do so and join him after the Saito fall. He serves Nobunaga faithfully as his page in many battles, but usually shares his master's fate when Mitsuhide Akechi betrays them at Honnoji Temple. Other versions of his story have him defend Nobunaga successfully and having to later duel his friend and slay him. Ranmaru is generally naive and a selfless person who serves his lord with all his being. Now let's see how he wields that oversized katana of his. Ranmaru is a wonder type, with a huge blade and some pretty big problems. His S-string is pretty wide-hitting, but it is fairly slow, and since he isn't a power type, this can be a problem. The problem flows into his charge attacks as well. They all have good range and power, but are slow to come out, so he takes a bit of skill to use without getting wrecked. Thankfully, his ground R1 buffs his weapon and increases attack speed, so that can cover that weakness as long as he has the Musou to use that. His air R1 also buffs his weapon judging from that weapon glow. His Musou is a standard Samurai Warrior Musou with multi-hitting attacks or invincibility. His passive is Wonder, which is just like the power passive, but for Wonder-type characters. Overall, Ranmaru really takes some work, but he hits really hard and wide, so with some effort he can devastate. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Why the Hell Do We Care? I am your host, Rihanna Bahamut, and I hope you all will join me next time when we investigate what is going on at Ueda Castle.